Welcome to Season 2 of Thread Talks. My name is Kadesh Handy. I'm an industrial designer at Twinery. And today we're joined by Nishelli Perera, who's the lead for Circularity here at MAS.
Hi, Kadesh.
Hi. So Nish, let's talk about circularity. What is circularity?
Okay, so circularity is about designing and manufacturing clothes using sustainable materials with end-of-life solutions in mind, so that clothes can be either reused, recycled, or repaired into new clothes at the end of its life.
And why has circularity gained so much attention over the past couple of years?
So in 2017, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation published this massive piece of research highlighting how detrimental the fashion industry is, that the fashion industry is actually the second most polluting industry in the world. Some of the things that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation highlighted was that 97% of the resources that we use in the fashion industry are virgin materials, the materials that we take from the earth, not recycled materials. And then we manufacture massive quantities of product, 40 to 50 million tons of product per year, which within 3 to 5 years just ends up in landfill or incineration. So we are taking natural resources, manufacturing massive quantities of product and just wasting it away. And the fashion industry is only recycling in a closed loop 1% of the product. So this is hugely detrimental, and not only is it hugely detrimental, if you map out the trajectory that we are heading in, it's not sustainable at all. So the fashion industry is at a stage where it really needs to take stock of the way we operate and switch to more sustainable circular business models.
And when this study was published, how did that impact the current industry or the apparel industries and the big players in it?
Oh, I think it sent shockwaves reverberating throughout the industry, because the concept of circularity is nothing new. It's been around since 1988. Actually, at its core, the concept of circularity is actually embedded in ancient history and philosophy as well. But the fashion industry had paid no attention to it until 2017, when this piece of research was published. And suddenly, everyone took note. We had the brands coming out with very public, ambitious goals about what changes they wanted to make. We had a lot of companies making investments in recyclers, in re-commerce, in different platforms. So we saw the brands making changes, we saw investment flowing into this space, and we saw regulations starting to come out, not in the US that much, but especially in Europe, and also the consumers. So now when you survey consumers, you see that especially Gen X and millennials, they say that 45% say that they don't want to buy from a non-sustainable brand. 51% say that they want to know what happens to the product at end of life. So it has really changed how consumers, regulators, manufacturers, investors, and brands really look at the fashion industry and how they operate.
So it sounds like it's not just about how the product was produced, it's the business model in a whole that had to change.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. It's not just about design, it's just not about recycling. It's about a business model, and that's what circularity is. It's a business model that's in a closed loop. And it's a business model that requires different parts of the fashion industry ecosystem to work together to make it work.
And what we see in the world right now, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but is a more linear structure, or has been a linear structure business model for a lot of the big players, even the smaller players in the field. What is the impact of switching to a circular business model in this day and age?
So McKinsey actually quantified this, and if you move from a linear business model in the fashion industry to more circular business models, you can save 143 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions in a year. And when I read that number, it didn't make sense to me because I didn't have context for it. But to put it in context, that's how much countries like Israel, Singapore, Sri Lanka all put together would emit in a year. So when McKinsey quantified it, they said that's if 1 in 5 clothes are circularized. So if 1 in 5 clothes are following a circular business model, we will save 143 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions in a year. So I think it's worthwhile us paying some attention to circular business models.
Definitely. And if we push that bar beyond that 1 in 5 clothes, the impact that it's going to cause to the industry is massive.
Absolutely.
And
You're right.
to climate change in a whole at that point.
And I think we have a huge responsibility. We have a responsibility as manufacturers. We have a responsibility as consumers not to just get caught up in fast fashion and overconsumption, to really pay attention to our purchasing decisions and also pay attention to what we do with the products we purchase at end of life.
So playing both sides of the field here as a consumer and as someone who works for a large manufacturer that takes on big brands, how do you think you can create an impact, or what would you say people should do to create that impact, seeing both sides of the field?
So I think that that everyone in the fashion industry has to take responsibility to play their part. No one person can solve for it. As a manufacturer, we are very cognizant. So MAS has this thing called, are you familiar with the MAS Plan for Change?
No, please do share.
So MAS has this incredible strategy called the MAS Plan for Change, which is MAS's commitment to sustainability, not just for building a sustainable business, but also bringing about sustainability in our communities, with our partners and for our planet as a whole. What we've outlined in the MAS Plan for Change is how we can change products for good, lives for good, and planet for good. And circularity fits firmly in that space of changing product for good. So we want to manufacture products that are good for the wearer, good for business, and good for the planet as a whole. I think I've deviated a little bit from your original question, but I do want to talk about this. So as a manufacturer, we have made this commitment to make products that are sustainable and circular, and that's the responsibility and commitment that MAS as a manufacturer has made. And as consumers also, we have that responsibility to purchase more consciously and purchase possibly less.
And we as MAS, that's a major manufacturer, is pushing for this, but are there bigger brands out there, fashion brands, that are pushing for this kind of circular business model and circularity?
Absolutely. So I know sometimes brands get accused of greenwashing, but in the case of circularity, I've seen that there's a lot of brands doing a lot of good and having very strong ambitions in this space. But how you can really judge them, whether they are greenwashing or whether they are actually concerned about solving this problem, is the fact that they're investing money behind circularity. So we have companies like H&M, Lululemon, Nike, a lot of these big brands making serious commitments that are very impressive. Not only are they kind of coming out and saying by 2025 we'll achieve these targets in circularity, but they're also putting money behind it. So companies like Patagonia is setting up re-commerce platforms, they're setting up repair platforms. Lululemon gives their customers the option to resell, repair, re-commerce their products. You've got H&M that works with this, acquired a company called Selfie that enables people again to re-commerce. So you have brands that are not just saying that they want to be sustainable and just saying that they want to have circular products. They're really investing in this space. So I think brands are really taking circularity seriously. It's not the newest buzzword. It's here to stay, and it's a serious problem that we need to solve.
So it sounds like they're not just talking the talk, they're also
Absolutely.
walking the walk at that point.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Yes.
So we talked about circularity within MAS, and we also talked about how MAS contributes to this. Can you share a few details on what MAS's vision is to circularity and how we see ourselves approaching it in the coming years?
Yes. So MAS has taken a broad view of circularity. So we are not looking at it just from, we're a manufacturer and we're just going to solve for this narrow space that we're in. We're taking a broad view for it and attacking the problem from multiple angles. So what we want to do first is design and manufacture products using sustainable materials with end-of-life solutions in mind. So that's the manufacturing and design component. Then the second thing we want to do is that we want to ensure that the any waste from our production process, there's always going to be a little bit of waste in the production process. We want to ensure that that cut waste is then recycled back to yarn to manufacture more material. So we want zero waste from our production process ending up in landfill or incineration. And the third part is that we want to partner with consumers, with brands, with sorting and segregation companies to enable post-consumer circularity. So we are trying to attack this problem from 3 different angles to ensure that we take a broad view on circularity.
So you mentioned post-consumer circularity. Could you talk about the difference between pre-consumer circularity and post-consumer circularity?
Sure. I know it sounds a little bit confusing. So pre-consumer circularity is when, say, if you're making that shirt and there's material left on the factory floor, taking that material and recycling it. That's pre-consumer. Post-consumer is a lot more complicated because that's after the consumer uses it, after the consumer is done with it, trying to get the consumer to return the product to the store or to the brand that they purchased it from, getting the brand to send it to a sorting and segregation company, sending that to recyclers and getting that yarn extruded from the clothing to make the next set of garments. So pre-consumer circularity is a low-hanging fruit that we can solve for. Post-consumer circularity is much harder, but it's something we have to do as well.
And do you think it's beneficial in the long run to adapt both types of circularity and not just settle for one?
It's not beneficial, it's a must do.
Good way to put it. So, given your knowledge in circularity and your involvement in it, what have you seen to be the keys for success in circularity?
I think it's partnerships, partnerships, partnerships. I know I've mentioned this several times in this conversation, but that's because I can't stress it enough. It's about connecting with everyone in this space to work together because it doesn't matter how much investment you have in this space. Money alone is not going to solve that problem. You need partnerships to have success in this space.
And with adopting these partnerships and looking to strengthen it further, what are the challenges that come with it?
There's a lot of challenges in solving for this, but one key challenge that we are seeing is that the technology to recycle is not at scale yet. So the technology that we have in recycling is mostly at pilot stage. So you have a lot of new technologies coming, so they're testing it out at pilot scale, but it hasn't. Most recyclers have not gone to commercial scale yet. So what that means is that, for a company like MAS, we don't have the kind of volumes that we can purchase, and we also can't get it at the right price. I know a lot of people would say they want to purchase sustainable product, but if the price is 10 times more, they're not going to purchase it. So taking technology from pilot scale to commercial scale is one of the challenges we're facing in this space.
So would you say it's more of a waiting game at this point, wait for technology to catch up, or how would you approach that?
I don't think waiting is an option because this is a problem that we should have solved yesterday. So it's a matter of working with these recyclers. Many of the recyclers have constraints. So some would say we can only recycle, we can only give you output that's black. Another would say we can only give you, we can only recycle if spandex content is below X%. So every recycler has, their set of constraints, and I think it's up to us to work with as many recyclers as possible and to work with them and go along with them in that journey. We can't wait for technology to catch up.
So what I'm hearing is that we can't pause and pump the brakes and wait for technology to catch up,
yes.
But at the same time, it's technology that is the challenge. So where would you say we should position our money or position our infrastructure when it comes to filling those gaps?
That's a big question and might be above my pay grade, Katesh.
So let's move on to the consumers and the consumers that do make an impact in this day and age, the Gen Z consumers,
Yes.
as we talked about. So the Gen Z consumers who, follow trends, they create trends, they're influencers, they set the standard for what's going to be known as in fashion at this time in this period of time. And they've become hyper aware of sustainable product and being conscious about it. So how do their purchasing decisions start to impact circularity?
So one way that their purchasing decisions have really impacted the fashion industry is that everyone talks about how they shop more consciously, but something that is not spoken about as much is their willingness to thrift, their willingness to kind of have a closet with a revolving door where they buy something, they wear it for a few days, and they sell it to someone else, buy someone else's used clothes or rent somebody's clothes. So it's this willingness to thrift and wear used clothes that's kind of shifting how consumers behave, because previous generations, they kind of buy clothes, wear it for a long period of time, and then get rid of it. And previous generations weren't really willing to wear other people's clothes unless they absolutely had to. Whereas this generation, that's kind of their norm. So that's we see that re-commerce and resale is doubling every few years, and that change in their behavior is definitely going to impact how the fashion industry works.
Okay. And I myself, we as people who do go out once in a while, we like looking like being in the trend, being with the trend. And sometimes the trend is something that was trendy 80 years ago, 40 years ago, the gap varies.
The mom jeans are in now, I can't get with the program.
Exactly, and even to that point, we've always I've dug up in my parents' closet and my brother's closet, seeing what has lasted the test of time and used it. But I know that most of the brands that I wear at this point or have purchased in the past few years, not all of them can stand the test of time. Because generations after me won't be able to wear them, not for lack of trying, but just because it doesn't hold its
last
integrity.
Longer, because that's the problem with fast fashion, right? So with these products, with the consumer demanding cheaper products and only wanting to wear, a T-shirt a couple of times and then chuck it in a bin. Brands have also kind of catered to that need. They have moved from manufacturing durable products to products that can be worn 3-5 times and then thrown away. So I think we need to go back to creating, that's part of circularity, designing and manufacturing clothes that are durable. Definitely. So durability, I think, is key. And I think we should also go back to repairing clothes. I think our grandparents' generation, everyone knew how to use needle and thread, whereas this generation, there's a hole in this T-shirt, I'm not going to wear it anymore. So I think we need to go back to repairing our clothes, sewing. If there's a hole in it, sew it up and normalize that. It should be okay to repair and reuse clothes.
So with a lot of people involved in the circular business model, we hear a conversation about regulations and regulators. What role do regulations play in the business model of circularity?
So where we're seeing serious regulation is from the European Union. So the EU Commission has published the Circular Economy Action Plan, and in the Circular Economy Action Plan, they highlighted 5 key industries where they felt, these 5 industries really need to get their act together in terms of circularity, and textiles is one of them. So after they published the Circular Economy Action Plan, then they came up with a strategy for implementing it. And one of the policy tools that they've come up with is something called extended producer responsibility. And that's placing responsibility on the brand, on the manufacturer for the products they manufacture. So if you're going to make a T-shirt, then you have to tell the consumer, give the consumer an option of how to recycle it at end of life. So the role that the regulators in Europe are playing is that they are forcing the brand and manufacturer to take responsibility for the products that they manufacture. You can no longer just manufacture products and put it out there into the world and say, my job is done. You have to take responsibility from cradle to cradle. So make ways for a product to be reused, recycled, repaired.
So with these regulations in play, how committed have fashion brands become to contributing to circularity?
The way the European Union is going to be rolling this out, I don't think it's a matter of whether they're going to be committed. I think it's a matter of they have to get with the program. And that's what's great about some of this legislation that's coming up in Europe. My only hope is that it trickles down to the rest of the world, especially America.
So we're all consumers in this space,
Yes.
right? We all purchase clothing. What would it take for us to be 100% bought into the circular business model or into circularity through fashion?
So I don't think it's a matter of convincing people to do the right thing. People already want to do the right thing. It's a matter of showing them how to do it. So you can't just tell someone recycle your clothes if you don't tell them how to do it. And brands need to create take-back programs that say, okay, you return your old clothes and we give you $5 credit for returning it, or even if you don't give an incentive, just make the way possible. Make a way for consumers to return clothes. And the second thing is also we need to make the price right. We can't tell them, oh, here's a circular product, but it's going to cost $150 to buy it. We need to say, we need there to be price parity between a product made from virgin materials versus a product made by recycled materials.
And this also includes like making the consumer aware of the products they're purchasing and where it comes from. It used to be like years ago, it used to be, okay, I'm sure my products are ethically sourced or manufactured, but now it's a whole life cycle.
Absolutely.
When that kind of conversation comes into play, you hear of product passports or digital product
Yes,
passports.
yeah.
Let's hear a little bit about what product passports are.
Product passports are interesting. I'll confess that I'm not an expert in them, but what I do understand is that it's about putting digital identifiers in your clothing so that information about the product's entire value chain is contained in the product. Also, things like the composition of the product is contained in this digital identifier. So product passports are facilitated by blockchain, along with things like QR codes, RFID, NFC, and what it does, it solves several problems for the fashion industry. One is it solves for things like counterfeiting for very high value items. Second thing is it provides the consumer with the transparency they want about who made this product. Where did you get the cotton from? Is it from a conflict region? Where is this product? Who made it? Where is the raw materials coming from? And they also want information on what do I do with this product when I'm done with it. So product passports, I think, will play a key role going forward because it'll have all that information that consumers want contained in it.
And with product passports comes the option of, the given set of transparency. You start to realize where your product started and where it's going to end. But with that also comes the opportunity to educate. So how do we purpose product passports to educate the consumer to be like, hey, this is where your clothes need to end up at the end of their life cycle?
I think at some point consumers are going to know that every product is going to have a product passport. So I think hopefully consumers would get used to, oh, I'm done with it, let's scan it and figure out where this needs to go. Oh, it's cotton, so it needs to go to this cotton recycler. Or it's polyester, so I send it here. I think, I hope that that's what the future holds for us, that at end of product life, that every consumer knows what to do with their product and where to channel it.
And it's no secret that we need to make heavy changes to the way we live. The pandemic that happened in 2020 revealed all of that to us. Said, okay, these are the things that don't work.
Yeah.
With those changes, we've been looking at where we can start immediate change, where we can start making an impact and not waiting 5-6 years, not waiting until we have to purchase a T-shirt or a shirt that can be given back 10 years from now. So as consumers, what immediate change can we make to create a positive difference?
I think start with the little changes. I think every time you purchase something, think about, do I really need this? Is it something that's so trendy that it'll be out of fashion next week? is it made with sustainable materials? It's not just also about purchasing decisions, it's that willingness to, through the life of the product, if you're not wearing it, give it to someone or resell it, get some money off of it. If it's coming apart, sew it up. So it's about really changing the way we think about products. We have become people that overconsume. I mean, it's just a few generations ago, if they saw the way we consume, they'll be appalled. And we just need to kind of take a step back and think about the way we consume, the way we operate, the way we treat product, and be a lot more conscious. And this change in mentality needs to come very fast because we are so close to, kind of being in that danger zone.
So with design, we're jumping into that. Design
Your
involves
favorite topic.
Definitely. So design involves a lot of parts and a lot of moving parts, and the golden ticket here is to everybody wants to achieve good design. But what does it mean to say that good design is circular?
Can I ask you that? What would good design mean for you, since you are the industrial designer?
So it's being aware of, like, in creating product from prototype, from an idea to a final prototype and into production, it's being hyper aware of what you're creating, why you're creating it, and most importantly, what you're using to create it. Materials play a huge role because at the end of the day, it's a composition of materials in various forms and shapes and sizes.
Absolutely.
So as a designer, that to me becomes the topic of conversation. Like, let's look at good design in a way that all the materials can be repurposed, because we don't want to keep pumping on things using resources that are finite to create a product that ends up in the landfill.
I don't think I could have answered that better myself.
Okay. Talk to us about the difference between greenwashing and brands that actually make an impact and putting their foot out there.
So if you look at some of the big brands, they have come out with some very ambitious and very serious targets. And the fact that they have made these very public statements about the commitments they have towards circularity tells me that they are serious about it. So Nike wants 80% of their waste diverted from landfill. PVH wants the top 3 products to be circular. We have Lululemon that says they want to provide options for recycling, repair, re-commerce for all their customers. So we have these big brands saying that, making very serious commitments and saying, hey, I want to do this by 2025. So it's, once you made those statements, once you made those commitments, it's not things that you can kind of wriggle out of. So that tells me that these big brands, they're not trying to greenwash, they're serious about circularity, and they're going after it with very concrete plans. That's one way. The second way is if you look at the investments they're making in this space, and the investments are in multiple arenas. So you have companies like Patagonia that are investing in recycling, they're investing in repair, they're investing in recycling. You have another great company that's looking at circularity in multiple ways is H&M. So they're investing in re-commerce, but they're also investing in recycling. These brands are putting money behind their commitments. So when brands start putting money behind their commitments and putting money in hedging their bets in multiple ways. So they're not saying, okay, we want to have circular business models, but we're only investing in recycling. No, they're looking at investing in recycling. They're looking at investing in repair, in re-commerce. So brands that are putting money behind their commitments, I think, are serious, and they're not greenwashing. It's I think most of these brands are here for the long haul with circularity, because they realize how serious the problem is.
And you did mention that one of the keys to success, having successful circularity, is partnering.
Absolutely.
And with these bigger brands, they're not going to be able to, overnight flip the switch and come up with an infrastructure. So how do you think MAS has positioned themselves well with developing this and starting the conversation, and not just now, like years ago, beginning to think about this and beginning to implement it in the field?
So that's a good question. I think we are in a very good position to enable circularity because we are kind of at the beginning stage, right? So if a product is not designed for circularity, if it's not manufactured using the right materials, the product cannot be circular down the road. So we have an integral role to play in terms of design and manufacturing. And we also have a role to play in terms of getting clothing back from the consumer and extruding yarn out of used clothing and making new clothes from it. So if you take the loop, we are at the beginning in terms of designing and manufacturing, but we're also at the end where we're taking extruding yarn from the used clothes to design the new clothes. So I feel like we are at that beginning and end of closing that loop.
Which is a great way to position ourselves.
Absolutely.
This is really insightful stuff. Thanks, Nishelli, for joining us and talking about this.
Thank you so much for making this interesting and fun.
No problem. All right, thank you.